Imagine you're walking into your favorite office building. The polished glass walls, the shiny floors, the sleek elevators, everything speaks of success, luxury, and wealth. Now picture the people who walk through those doors every day. Powerful CEOs, well-dressed professionals, and entrepreneurs who seem to have it all. But one day, something happens that shakes up everything you thought you knew about who's really in charge. It starts with a rich man in a luxury car pulling into the parking lot. You know the type: tailored suit, designer watch, a smug grin on his face, and that air of superiority that makes you feel like he believes the world revolves around him. The car he drives is the kind that screams wealth, a shiny, spotless, high-end vehicle. Every inch of it says success. And yet, as he parks it in one of the premium spots, his eyes fall on something that makes him chuckle under his breath. A beat-up, old sedan is parked in one of the regular spaces, its faded paint and rusted rims telling a story of age and neglect. To the rich man, it's a joke, a laughable contrast to his own polished ride. He scoffs and shakes his head, as though it's beneath him to even acknowledge the presence of such a car. He can't help but snicker at the janitor's clunker. But here's where it gets interesting. What if I told you that the man in the suit had just made a huge mistake? What if that janitor, the one who drives the beat-up car, isn't who he seems? You're going to want to stick around, because this story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. Trust me, you're going to want to know what happens next. Stay with me, because this is a story of assumptions, of making judgments without all the facts, and of what happens when the tables are turned in the most unexpected way. You see, this rich man, who laughs at the janitor's car, is about to find out something that changes everything. Something so shocking that it'll make him rethink every decision he's ever made about people, wealth, and status. Now, let's back up for a second and talk about why you need to pay attention. It's easy, isn't it? To look at someone and think you know who they are. We all do it. We make judgments based on what we see, the car they drive, the clothes they wear, the job they have. It's human nature to make assumptions, but what happens when those assumptions turn out to be completely wrong? What happens when the person you think is at the bottom is actually the one holding all the cards? Picture this. You've been working at the same building for years. You've seen the high-powered executives come and go, watched them rush to their meetings with their briefcases and phones glued to their ears. And then there's the janitor, the guy who shows up every night to clean the floors, empty the trash, and make the place look pristine. Most people barely even notice him. He's just another cog in the machine, right? At least, that's what they think. But what if I told you that the janitor isn't just some faceless worker? What if I told you that he owns the very building you think is owned by a high-powered corporation? The rich man, of course, never imagines that the janitor could have anything to do with the building. To him, the janitor is just a minor player in the grand scheme of things. He's there to clean up after the real movers and shakers, the people who make decisions, the people who run the world. But the truth is, the janitor's story is far more complex than the rich man could ever imagine. Now, let's go back to that moment. The rich man parks his shiny car, still chuckling to himself about the old sedan, and heads inside. He passes the janitor on his way in, nodding curtly as he walks by, his mind already focused on the day ahead. The janitor doesn't say a word. He's seen this before, the dismissive glances, the condescending smiles. It's nothing new to him. But what the rich man doesn't know is that the janitor has been keeping a secret that's about to turn everything upside down. You see, while the rich man is busy laughing at the old car, he doesn't realize that the janitor holds the key to the building's future. And soon, that key will unlock a series of events that no one could have predicted. So, let's talk about the building for a second. It's not just any building. This isn't some nondescript office tower. No, this is a prime piece of real estate in the heart of the city, a building that houses some of the most important businesses in the area. It's a hub of activity, a place where deals are made and fortunes are won. The kind of place where people go to make their mark on the world. But it's also a place where power dynamics are at play, where the rich and powerful pull the strings, and where those at the bottom stay in the shadows, out of sight and out of mind. The janitor, however, has a different perspective. He knows this building like the back of his hand. He's been here longer than most of the executives who stroll through the doors every day. He's seen the ups and downs, the changes, the power struggles, and the corporate games. He's worked his way through the ranks, learning every secret the building has to offer. And while the rich man might think he's the one in control, the janitor knows a few things that the rich man doesn't. Now here's where things get interesting. As the day goes on, the rich man continues with his usual routine. He attends meetings, makes deals, and gives orders. But there's a shift in the air, a sense of anticipation, as if something is brewing just beneath the surface. The janitor, for his part, continues his work, cleaning the floors, mopping the halls, and taking care of the building as he always has. But this time, there's a quiet confidence in his steps, a sense that he's not just a small player in this world of power and wealth. And then, the moment arrives. The rich man, caught up in his own world, doesn't notice the shift happening around him. But the janitor does. He knows it's time to act. So what does he do? He makes a call that will change everything. And just like that, the rich man's world starts to unravel. You see, the janitor doesn't just clean the building. He owns it. Now, let's pause here for a second. I know you're probably thinking, what? How is that possible? But stick with me, the answer is coming. The rich man is about to learn a lesson he'll never forget, and trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. So, here's what I want you to do. Don't click away. Don't jump to another video. Because in just a few moments, everything you thought you knew about wealth, status, and power is about to change. You're going to see how a single phone call can flip the script in the most surprising way. And by the end of the story, you'll understand just how quickly things can go from bad to worse when you've underestimated someone.
Stay tuned.
You're about to find out just how this story ends. And trust me, it's not what you think. As the day progresses, the rich man's smug confidence only grows. He's been riding a high for weeks now. His latest business venture has been making waves, his social media following is climbing, and he's convinced that nothing could possibly shake his position. The meetings he attends go smoothly, the deals he strikes seem almost effortless, and the people around him, though seemingly important, are nothing more than pawns in his grand chess game. His mind is focused solely on power, control, and wealth, things that he believes are well within his grasp. But behind the scenes, things aren't quite as perfect as they seem. The building, which he walks through every day, isn't just a place for meetings and business deals. It holds secrets, and it holds stories. Stories that most people, especially those in positions like the rich man's, would prefer to remain buried. The janitor, for instance, has worked in this building for years, longer than anyone realizes. He's seen everything, from the rise and fall of businesses to the quiet whispers of betrayal that echo through the hallways. He's watched people come and go, watched their arrogance, their ambition, and the way they treat those they consider beneath them. But through it all, he's remained mostly unnoticed, keeping to himself, going about his work, and watching. His silence hasn't been out of fear. No, the janitor isn't afraid of anyone. The real reason he's kept his distance is more complex. It's because he's been planning for something bigger than what anyone in this building could ever imagine. He knows every corner of the place like the back of his hand. He's seen the inside of every office, the hidden staircases, the secure vaults where deals are made and contracts are signed. He's learned the people, their habits, their strengths and weaknesses. He knows the way the rich man and others in power operate. They think they control everything, but the janitor knows that it's not always the loudest voice in the room that holds the real power. For years, the janitor has kept his presence quiet, never drawing attention to himself. He's bided his time, knowing that sooner or later, the building would need him. And when that moment comes, he would be ready. What the rich man doesn't know is that the janitor isn't just some old employee hanging around doing his job. The janitor has connections, influence, and a far greater stake in the building's future than anyone could guess. And while the rich man continues to look down on him, laughing at his old car and dismissing him as just another lowly worker, the janitor has been quietly orchestrating a plan that would soon turn the tables. But there's one person who could complicate everything, Vanessa. She's the building's head of security, a woman with a sharp mind and a no-nonsense attitude. She's been working at the building for a decade, and in that time, she's seen just about everything. She's seen the rich man walk through the doors, flashing his designer suits and expensive shoes, always thinking he's above it all. But what Vanessa has learned over the years is that things are never as simple as they appear. She's seen people come and go, seen the power struggles, the behind-the-scenes drama. She's even caught whispers about the janitor, whispers that have made her curious about him, even though she's never spoken to him directly. There have been moments when Vanessa's gaze would follow the janitor as he went about his work, a thought lingering in the back of her mind. Who is this man, really? What does he know? And more importantly, what does he want? She's never voiced these questions to anyone, but they've been there, gnawing at her. If there's one thing Vanessa knows, it's that nothing happens without reason, especially in a place like this. People don't just stay silent for years and make no moves. But for now, Vanessa keeps her distance, keeping her observations to herself. Little does she know, she's closer to uncovering the truth than she could ever imagine. As the rich man continues his day, unaware of the storm brewing around him, he encounters a new challenge. His favorite spot in the building, the luxurious executive lounge, complete with plush chairs and stunning city views, has been reserved. Normally, this wouldn't be an issue. He would simply have one of his underlings clear the reservation and ensure the space is available for him. But this time, something is different. The reservation was made under the janitor's name. It doesn't make sense. The rich man knows that janitors don't have access to these rooms. They don't book spaces in the executive lounge. They don't have the kind of influence to make such arrangements. But there it is, a reservation made by the janitor, and it's not the first time this has happened. The more the rich man thinks about it, the more unsettling it becomes. Could it be some kind of mistake? Maybe a fluke, a glitch in the system? But then his curiosity gets the better of him. He decides to investigate further. After all, it's not every day that someone like the janitor manages to get access to the most exclusive spaces in the building. The rich man starts to ask questions, subtle ones that won't draw attention to himself. But every answer he gets only deepens the mystery. The janitor's name is everywhere. It's attached to official documents, building contracts, and legal papers. The building's management, which the rich man has always believed to be a distant, faceless corporation, has ties to the janitor. The deeper he digs, the more he uncovers. There's something far bigger going on here than he could have ever imagined. But even with all his resources, he can't quite connect the dots. The janitor's past, his ownership of the building, his connections, it's all wrapped in layers of secrecy and complexity. But the rich man doesn't give up. He's determined to get to the bottom of it. And just when he thinks he's uncovered the truth, when the pieces of the puzzle are almost in place, he receives a call. The call that will change everything. Vanessa, the head of security, has uncovered something as well. She's been following a trail of clues that leads her to the same conclusion the rich man has been trying to avoid. The janitor isn't just a lowly employee. He's something far more dangerous. Something much more powerful. The tension in the air grows thicker by the minute. The pieces of the puzzle are starting to fit together, but the more the rich man learns, the more uncertain he becomes. Is he really the one in control? Or is he just a pawn in someone else's game? At this point, nothing is as it seems, and every move the rich man makes brings him closer to the truth, and closer to the person who's been quietly watching it all unfold. But as the final pieces of the mystery begin to come together, something happens that no one could have predicted. The janitor isn't just playing a game of power, he's playing a game of revenge. As the days go by, the rich man's obsession with uncovering the truth about the janitor grows. He can't shake the feeling that he's being led down a path he's not meant to walk. Every step he takes seems to uncover more questions than answers. The closer he gets to the truth, the more he starts to feel like something is blocking his way, as though there's a hidden force working against him, keeping him in the dark. He starts to notice strange things happening around him. Files he's reviewed one day mysteriously vanish the next. Emails he was certain he sent, gone from his inbox. The more he digs, the more things slip through his fingers, as if someone is actively trying to stop him. It begins with a document, a legal contract he's tracked down, one that he believes will confirm the janitor's ownership of the building is missing. He searches his office high and low, retracing his steps, hoping he's just misplaced it. But it's nowhere to be found. His assistant, a young woman named Claire, swears she saw the document on his desk just the day before. Claire has always been efficient and reliable, and yet, she seems a little too calm for someone who should be concerned about such a critical document disappearing. The rich man's instincts tell him something isn't right. Claire has always been a little too perfect, a little too eager to please, and now that same eagerness feels suspicious. But as he starts to question Claire, she seems almost too cooperative, brushing off his concerns with a smile and a shrug, assuring him that she's just as puzzled as he is. She suggests maybe it's a simple oversight, a mistake in the filing system. But deep down, the rich man can't shake the feeling that something's off. And just when he's about to press her for more information, his phone rings. It's Vanessa, the head of security. Her voice is cold, serious, and tinged with urgency. She tells him that he needs to stop digging into the janitor's background, that he's overstepping. He needs to drop the investigation or else things could get ugly. The way she says it sends a chill down his spine. It's not a request, it's a warning. At first, he thinks maybe Vanessa is just trying to protect him from the unknown, trying to save him from making a mistake that could lead to trouble. But there's something in her tone, a hardness, that suggests she knows more than she's letting on. He tries to press her for details, to understand why she's so adamant that he stop looking into the janitor's history. But Vanessa isn't having it. She cuts the conversation short, leaving him more frustrated and confused than ever. Now, with the missing document, Claire's strange behavior, and Vanessa's cryptic warning, the rich man feels like he's trapped in a web of lies. Everywhere he turns, something or someone is holding him back. And the closer he gets to the truth, the more the obstacles mount. But there's something else, something deeper, that he's starting to suspect, a hidden betrayal. He begins to wonder if the people closest to him, those who he thought were on his side, might be working against him. To make matters worse, he receives a visit from an old acquaintance, someone he hadn't seen in years. This person, Ethan, is a former business partner, someone with whom the rich man once shared great success. But their relationship ended on bad terms, with a business deal gone wrong and trust broken between them. Ethan was always a little too ambitious, a little too eager to get ahead, and their falling out had left a bitter taste in the rich man's mouth. But now, here he is, standing in front of him, asking for a meeting. Ethan claims that he's turned over a new leaf, that he's looking to make amends for the past. But the rich man can't help but feel uneasy. Ethan is a smooth talker, someone who knows how to get what he wants, and the rich man wonders if this meeting is truly about reconciliation or if it's part of some larger scheme. Ethan suggests that they sit down and discuss the situation over a drink. The rich man, wary but intrigued, agrees. They meet at a private bar, far from the prying eyes of the office building. Ethan wastes no time getting to the point. He tells the rich man that he's heard whispers about the janitor, whispers that suggest the man is not who he appears to be. He implies that there's more to the janitor's story than anyone knows, and that maybe the rich man should tread carefully before getting too involved. Ethan, with his connections and knowledge of the building's hidden dealings, claims he can help the rich man uncover the truth. But there's a catch. He wants something in return. Ethan wants the rich man to partner with him again, to combine their resources and power. He promises that together, they can unearth everything about the janitor's past and secure the building for good. The rich man listens carefully, weighing the offer. It's tempting. Ethan has always been a man who gets things done, no matter the cost. But there's something unsettling about the way he's presenting himself now. His charm feels like a mask, hiding a more dangerous agenda. The rich man wonders if this is all just another power play, a way for Ethan to manipulate him into a deal that benefits only Ethan. But in this moment of uncertainty, the rich man realizes that he's running out of options. He's not sure who he can trust anymore, and the walls are closing in. That night, after the meeting, he receives an anonymous tip. It's a message with no name, no return number, just a single line of text. You're looking in the wrong direction. The janitor is the key, but you're missing something important. The message sends a cold shiver down his spine. It's clear that someone else knows what he's up to, and that they're watching his every move. But what does the message mean? What is he missing? The tension in the air becomes unbearable. The rich man knows that time is running out. He can't afford to make another mistake, but with each passing moment, the clues seem to slip further out of his grasp. He begins to question whether anyone is truly on his side. Vanessa's warning, Claire's strange behavior, Ethan's offer, they all seem like pieces of a puzzle that just won't fit together. Just when it seems like he's about to give up, he receives a phone call that changes everything. But this call, this twist, is unlike anything he's ever experienced before. It's a voice he recognizes, but one he never thought he'd hear again. The words they speak will send him down a path he never anticipated, a path that may lead him to the truth, or to his undoing. But before he can make sense of what's happening, the line goes dead. And in that moment, the rich man realizes that he's no longer in control. Someone else is pulling the strings now. The real question is who? And what happens next? Stay tuned, because the game is about to change. As the rich man stands there, phone in hand, staring at the deadline, he can't shake the feeling that the walls are closing in. The silence on the other end of the call feels like a warning, an omen that he's not as untouchable as he once thought. It's as if every step he takes brings him closer to the truth, but the closer he gets, the more dangerous the journey becomes. He's no longer sure who's on his side, and each move feels like a potential misstep that could lead him into a trap. But he doesn't have time to dwell on it. The game is changing, and he needs to adapt quickly. What he doesn't realize, though, is that this web of secrets isn't just ensnaring him. It's reaching out to those around him, pulling in people he cares about, and their fates are now tangled with his own. His assistant, Claire, is the first to feel the shift. She's been loyal, almost unnervingly so, but her behavior is starting to change. In the days following the strange disappearance of the document, Claire becomes distant, almost too quiet. She still manages to keep up with her work, but there's a coldness in her eyes, a sharpness to her movements that wasn't there before. She's always been a bit too eager to please, but now there's something else, something that feels almost like fear. One afternoon, as the rich man sits in his office, reviewing documents, Claire walks in, her face pale and her hands shaking. She tells him she's found something that doesn't add up. It's a new piece of evidence, a set of financial transactions that link his business to the janitor in a way that seems impossible to ignore. But before she can elaborate, Claire is interrupted by a phone call. The moment she hears the voice on the other end, her expression hardens. She abruptly ends the conversation and turns to the rich man, her face a mask of uncertainty. She tells him she can't continue working with him anymore, that she's being threatened. But the look in her eyes, the subtle tremor in her voice, suggests that there's more to the story than she's willing to admit. The rich man is stunned, his mind racing. How could Claire be caught up in this? He's never suspected her of anything other than loyalty, but now it feels like she's hiding something that might connect her to the growing mystery surrounding the janitor. As she walks out of the office, he feels the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The pieces of the puzzle are starting to fit together, but the more he learns, the more complicated it becomes. Claire, the janitor, Vanessa, Ethan, everyone around him is beginning to look like a suspect, and he's not sure who he can trust anymore. Meanwhile, Vanessa, the head of security, has been dealing with her own set of problems. Ever since her cryptic conversation with the rich man, she's been receiving anonymous messages, much like the ones he's been getting. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence, but the more the messages continue, the more it becomes clear that someone is trying to manipulate her. The strange thing is, the messages aren't threatening her directly. Instead, they warn her about the rich man, suggesting that he's in over his head, that he's about to make a mistake that will cost him everything. They urge her to stay away from the investigation, to stop helping him. But Vanessa doesn't take threats lightly. She's worked in security for years, and she knows how to read people, how to detect when something isn't right. And something about these messages doesn't sit well with her. They feel too personal, too specific. It's as if the person sending them knows far more than they should. But who? And why target her? She starts digging deeper, following a trail of breadcrumbs that leads her to a long-forgotten detail, a security breach from years ago, one that she thought had been resolved. It was a small incident, a glitch in the system, but as Vanessa starts to connect the dots, she realizes that the breach wasn't as insignificant as everyone believed. It was a coordinated attempt to access sensitive files that were linked to the janitor's past. The more she uncovers, the more it seems like the janitor's connection to the building is far more complicated than anyone ever realized. She starts to question her own role in this investigation, wondering if she's being played by someone with far more power than she can handle. In the midst of all this, a new figure enters the scene. Robert, the rich man's estranged brother. Robert has always been the black sheep of the family, the one who avoided the corporate world and lived on the fringes, a free spirit with a knack for getting into trouble. He and the rich man haven't spoken in years, their relationship strained by a series of business disputes and personal betrayals. But now, Robert shows up at the rich man's door, claiming that he has information that could change everything. He's been following the story, he says, and he knows who's behind the mysterious events unfolding around the janitor. Robert insists that the rich man needs to trust him, that the key to solving the mystery lies in understanding their family's own past. But the rich man isn't sure if he can trust Robert. The last time they spoke, Robert had accused him of prioritizing wealth over family, of making deals that put people in danger. Could Robert be using this situation to get back into his good graces, to manipulate him for his own gain? Or is he genuinely trying to help? The rich man feels like he's being pulled in all directions. Every person he encounters seems to have their own agenda, and the lines between ally and enemy are becoming increasingly blurred. As the mystery deepens, so too does the paranoia. The people closest to him, the ones he's relied on for years, are suddenly acting in ways he doesn't understand. Claire's cryptic departure, Vanessa's investigation into the security breach, and Robert's sudden reappearance, they all feel like pieces of a much larger puzzle. But the more he tries to connect the dots, the more fragmented the picture becomes. Every step forward feels like a step into the unknown, and each new discovery only leads to more questions. Who is orchestrating this elaborate game? And what do they want? In the final moments of this chapter, the rich man receives another message, this time with a chilling twist. It's an old photograph, one he recognizes immediately. It's a picture of his father, standing in front of the building that now bears the rich man's name. But there's something odd about it. In the background, standing in the shadows, is the janitor, a younger version, but unmistakably the same man. The message accompanying the photo simply reads, "He was always closer than you thought." The rich man stares at the photograph, his mind racing. What does this mean? How is the janitor connected to his father? And what is he hiding? The stakes are higher than ever, and the web of lies, deceit, and betrayal is tightening around him. There's only one thing he knows for certain now. He's not the one pulling the strings anymore. Someone else is in control, and until he figures out who, everything he thought he knew will continue to unravel. Stay tuned, because the truth is darker than anyone could have imagined, and it's only a matter of time before it all comes crashing down. The rich man couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It started out small, a subtle shift in the air, a sense that something was off. But the more he tried to ignore it, the stronger the feeling became. It wasn't just the strange messages, the disappearing documents, or the cryptic warnings. No, it was something more, something far more dangerous. He would glance over his shoulder when walking into the building, expecting to see someone there, but no one ever was. He would arrive at his car in the morning, only to find his keys ever so slightly out of place, as if someone had been touching them when he wasn't looking. It wasn't paranoia. He knew someone was following him, someone who had been tracking his every move for days, maybe longer. The question was who?
And why?
The paranoia consumed him, gnawing at him like a constant ache. Every conversation felt like it was being overheard. Every glance exchanged with someone at the office felt loaded with hidden meaning. And as much as he tried to focus on the investigation, it became harder and harder to ignore the gnawing fear. His hands trembled when he picked up the phone to dial, his breath caught in his chest whenever the doorbell rang. He was no longer sure if the danger was out there, or if it was already inside, closer than he realized. Every time he reached for the next piece of the puzzle, it felt like the walls were closing in faster, pushing him toward a truth that was more terrifying than he ever could have imagined. Then, one late afternoon, it happened. The call he had been dreading came, not from the unknown number he had grown accustomed to, but from his own assistant, Claire. Her voice on the other end was strained, barely above a whisper. He could hear the panic in her tone, and that was when the first real wave of fear hit him. "I know too much," Claire said, her words rushing out, barely coherent. "You need to stop. I don't know who they are, but they're coming for me, coming for both of us." The line went dead before he could say anything, leaving nothing but a cold silence on the other end. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried redialing the number over and over, but there was no answer. His stomach dropped, the feeling of dread suddenly settling deep in his bones. He didn't need to be told. Something had happened to Claire. Something he couldn't ignore. Frantic, he called Vanessa, hoping that maybe she could help, that she might know what to do. But her phone went straight to voicemail. It felt like the walls were closing in on him, and the very people he had relied on were vanishing. He was alone now, alone with this monstrous web of lies, and as much as he tried to convince himself that Claire was just caught up in some random act of misfortune, deep down, he knew better. This wasn't a coincidence. The janitor, the missing documents, the cryptic messages, they were all part of something much bigger than he had ever realized. And now, Claire was paying the price for it. She knew too much, and it had cost her. The fear wasn't the worst part, though. It was the realization that he was the one being targeted, that all of this was directed at him, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing down. He had no idea what he had uncovered, what it all meant, but he felt an icy certainty that whoever was behind this wasn't just looking for a piece of information. They were looking for something far more valuable, control. And as he sat in his office, staring at the abandoned chair where Claire once sat, he began to see it all with terrifying clarity. The game he had stepped into wasn't about uncovering a mystery. It was about survival. That night, his fears intensified. He drove home, every shadow feeling like a threat, every car that passed him on the road seeming to linger just a little too long. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following him, tailing him just out of sight. Every turn he made, every street he passed, felt like it led him deeper into a maze with no way out. His own reflection in the rearview mirror started to look foreign, as if the man staring back at him wasn't the same person who had started this investigation. The lines between what was real and what was imagined blurred, and he couldn't trust his own mind. When he arrived at his house, he immediately locked the doors and drew the curtains, shutting himself off from the outside world. But it didn't matter. The house felt too quiet, too still. And the silence, that oppressive silence, seemed to mock him. His phone buzzed on the counter, another message, but this one was different from the rest. This time, it wasn't just a cryptic warning or a taunting line. It was a direct threat, written in plain, chilling language. "Stop digging. Or next time, it will be you." There was no name, no indication of who had sent it, but the message was clear. He was no longer just a curious businessman chasing a mystery. He was a target. The gravity of the situation hit him like a freight train. This wasn't just about uncovering secrets anymore. It was about his life, and everything he had worked for was at risk. The stakes had never been higher, and he was no longer sure who was on his side. Was Vanessa working with the enemy? Or was she a pawn just like him? Was Claire just an innocent bystander, or had she been part of something darker all along? The walls seemed to close in tighter with every unanswered question, every dead end. And as he sat there in the silence of his home, the fear started to rise, gnawing at him from the inside out. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, a knock at the door. His heart stopped. No one ever came to his door at this hour. He slowly approached the door, his hand shaking as he reached for the handle. He paused for a moment listening. The house was still, too still. And then, Without warning, the door burst open with a force that sent him stumbling back. Standing in the doorway was a figure cloaked in darkness, their face hidden beneath a hood. Before he could react, the figure stepped forward, a cold voice breaking the silence. "You've been warned." The words sent a chill through him, paralyzing him in place. "Don't make the same mistake again." And just like that, they were gone. The door slammed shut, and the world seemed to go still. He stood there, frozen, heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't breathe. The weight of the situation crushed him. Whoever was behind this, whoever was pulling the strings, was no longer playing games. They had made it clear. They weren't afraid to come for him. But what did they want? And how far were they willing to go to get it? The mystery deepened, the stakes higher than ever, and with every passing minute, the rich man realized just how little control he had over the situation. The truth was out there, buried beneath layers of deception and danger, but finding it would come at a cost that might be too high for him to pay. Just when it seemed like the rich man was on the edge of uncovering the full truth, the entire foundation of everything he had believed came crumbling down. After the ominous visit from the shadowy figure, he spent the next few days in a haze of confusion and fear. The warnings kept coming, cryptic messages, strange occurrences, and the unmistakable feeling that someone was always one step ahead of him. The tension in his life was palpable, and he was becoming more desperate, more paranoid. He thought he had it all figured out. But as the pieces of the puzzle started to come together, one devastating truth emerged that changed everything he thought he knew. It happened late one night when he finally decided to meet with someone he had trusted completely throughout this investigation, Vanessa. She had been by his side since the beginning, always supportive, always offering guidance. Her advice had been invaluable, and he couldn't help but think she had the answers he so desperately needed. They met at a quiet bar in the city, the kind of place where secrets could be shared without fear of being overheard. The low hum of conversation and clinking glasses only heightened the tension between them. She looked nervous, her fingers tapping on the edge of her glass in an almost unconscious rhythm. "You've been distant lately," he said, trying to keep his tone casual, but there was a sharp edge to his words. "What's going on, Vanessa? You know more than you've been letting on." Her eyes flickered briefly to the door, as if checking for anyone who might be listening. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she dropped a bombshell that sent a chill through his entire body. "You're not the one they're after. It's me. You've been chasing the wrong thing from the start." He blinked, trying to process what she had just said. "What do you mean?" "I've been following the clues you gave me." "No, you haven't," she interrupted sharply. "You've been following the wrong clues, thinking they led to someone else, but they're leading to me. You've been playing right into their hands, and I didn't know how to tell you until now." He felt his chest tighten, his mind racing to make sense of her words. "What are you talking about, Vanessa? Why would they be after you? You've been helping me." Vanessa's face hardened, her eyes suddenly filled with something he had never seen before: guilt, fear, maybe even regret. "I didn't know how to tell you," she repeated, her voice trembling. "I wasn't always who you thought I was. My involvement in this whole thing goes back further than you can imagine. There are people out there who think I betrayed them. And now they're coming for me, but they're not going to stop there. They'll use you too." His stomach dropped as the gravity of her words hit him. The entire time he had thought she was his ally, his confidant, the one person he could trust in a world full of lies. But now, he wasn't sure who she was anymore. The pieces of the puzzle, once so clear, now felt shattered, impossible to put back together. Every moment they had spent together, every word exchanged, every piece of information she had provided, it was all cast into doubt. What if she had been manipulating him from the start? What if she had been one of the shadowy figures pulling the strings behind the scenes? "I didn't mean for you to get involved," Vanessa continued, her voice now filled with anguish. "I never wanted any of this to happen. But it's too late now. They're going to come after us both. And they'll make sure we don't leave this alive." The rich man's mind was reeling. He couldn't comprehend the gravity of the situation. How had he missed this? The signs had always been there, the small inconsistencies, the moments where Vanessa's story didn't quite add up. But he had been too focused on the bigger picture, too fixated on the mysterious janitor and the strange threats to notice the glaring truth right in front of him. Vanessa had been hiding something big, something dangerous. But then, just as he was about to demand more answers, his phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with an unknown number, and without thinking, he answered it. A cold, calculating voice echoed through the receiver, sending a jolt of ice through his veins. "Stop asking questions, or you'll both regret it." The line went dead before he could respond, leaving him speechless. He looked back at Vanessa, whose face had gone pale, her eyes wide with fear. "You've been warned," she whispered, almost to herself. He stared at her, his heart pounding in his chest. This was bigger than anything he had imagined. The investigation had taken a turn he couldn't have prepared for. The people behind this weren't just threatening him. They were playing a far more sinister game, one that would claim more than just his life. They were going after everything he held dear. And Vanessa? She was at the center of it all. Everything he thought he knew was a lie. Vanessa wasn't just helping him uncover the mystery. She was a key player in it. And now, they were both caught in a web of betrayal, secrets, and dangerous people who would stop at nothing to protect their own interests. The rich man could feel the walls closing in. He couldn't trust anyone, not even Vanessa. As the weight of the situation crashed down on him, he realized there was no easy way out. The path ahead was filled with threats, betrayal, and the haunting truth that his world had been built on a lie. What had started as a simple investigation had turned into a deadly game, and now, it was no longer about uncovering the truth. It was about surviving long enough to see who would be left standing when the dust settled. The rich man was left with one question that would haunt him for the rest of the night. Was Vanessa truly on his side, or was she just another piece in someone else's game? The tension in the rich man's life had reached a boiling point, and as each day passed, it became clear that there was no easy way out. The more he uncovered, the deeper the hole seemed to get, and now, with Vanessa's revelation, the walls around him were closing in faster than he could handle. Every turn he made only led to more confusion, more betrayal, and more impossible decisions that weighed heavily on his conscience. He thought he was close to the truth, that he was just one step away from understanding the whole twisted mess. But the truth, as it always does in stories like these, came at a cost. A terrible, unforgiving cost. Vanessa had vanished after their conversation, disappearing without a trace, and that left him in a frantic spiral. His phone buzzed incessantly with warnings, threats, and messages that only served to confuse him further. The calls were relentless. Sometimes they'd just be silent. Others were filled with cryptic lines that made his head spin. He tried to contact her, but her phone went straight to voicemail, her apartment was empty, and the places she frequented were all dead ends. The closer he got to finding her, the more he felt like he was being pushed toward a decision he wasn't prepared to make. One day, after hours of searching, he returned home, exhausted and at the end of his rope. But the sight that greeted him upon entering his living room stopped him cold. There, sitting calmly on his couch, was Claire, the assistant he'd trusted, the one who had been a part of his team from the beginning. Her expression was unreadable, her body language tense, as though she had been waiting for him for a long time. "You're looking for Vanessa, aren't you?" she asked, her voice low, almost too calm. His heart skipped a beat. He had no idea how Claire had gotten into his house. The door was locked. The alarm system had been activated. And yet, there she sat. Was she part of this? Had she known all along? "I don't know where she is," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I need to know what's going on. I can't do this anymore, Claire. I need the truth. All of it. No more games." Claire didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood up and walked slowly toward him, her eyes scanning him in a way that made him feel both exposed and vulnerable at once. "You have no idea what you're asking for," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're not ready for this. None of us are." The rich man's frustration bubbled up, and his patience snapped. "Then tell me, who's behind this? What's happening?" What is Vanessa really involved in? Claire's gaze softened, and she let out a sigh, as if preparing to reveal something he wasn't ready to hear. It's bigger than you think. You don't understand, do you? It's not just about you anymore. This isn't about your building or your reputation. It's about something much more dangerous. Something that reaches far beyond what you've seen so far. He felt a sickening unease coil in his stomach, as if the rug had been pulled out from under him. What do you mean? He demanded. Stop speaking in riddles and just tell me the truth. Claire's eyes darted to the window, and she took a long, deliberate breath. I wasn't just an assistant, you know. I'm not who you think I am. I've been working for someone else this whole time. Someone who has been pulling the strings, someone who has been watching you. You've been their pawn from the start. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He couldn't breathe. For a moment, everything felt like it was spinning out of control. The pieces that had once seemed to fit together so neatly now seemed like fragments of a shattered mirror. How could Claire, someone he had trusted so completely, have been playing him all this time? She had been his ally, his rock in this mess, and now she was telling him she was part of the very conspiracy he had been trying to unravel. You're telling me you've been using me? He asked, his voice shaking with disbelief and anger. You've been part of all of this, and you're just now telling me? What the hell is going on, Claire? She looked at him with something resembling pity, but there was no regret in her eyes, only a coldness that chilled him to his core. You've been in over your head for a long time, but I'm not the one who's going to break you. That's not my role. My job was to keep you from making any more mistakes, to help you stay on track. But now you have a choice. You have to decide. This is where it all comes down to one thing. Do you want to keep digging? Do you want to keep going down this path and risk everything? Or do you walk away, leave it all behind, and save yourself? The ultimatum hung in the air, suffocating him. The rich man had always been someone who faced challenges head-on, someone who took risks and reveled in the thrill of coming out on top. But now, he was faced with a choice that had nothing to do with success or failure, victory or defeat. This was about survival. And the hardest part? The person offering him the choice, the one he thought he could trust, had been part of the very system trying to destroy him. What happens if I walk away? He asked, his voice hoarse. What's at risk? Claire's face darkened, and she leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. Your life. Your career. Everything you've built. But it's not just you at risk anymore. Vanessa, she's involved. And if you keep going, they won't stop until they have everything they want from you. But if you back off, if you let this go, you may just make it out alive. But that's not a guarantee either. You're in too deep now, and you don't know who to trust. The weight of her words crashed over him, and for the first time since all this started, the rich man felt completely and utterly lost. This wasn't a puzzle anymore. It wasn't a game he could play and win. This was real, and the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. He had two options, but both led to consequences he wasn't prepared to face. If he walked away, he would lose everything he had worked for, his wealth, his reputation, the trust of the people around him. If he kept going, he would dive deeper into a web of lies and deceit, possibly putting himself and those he cared about in even greater danger. The clock was ticking, and every second that passed felt like a countdown to something inevitable. The choice he had to make was no longer about right or wrong, good or bad. It was about survival. And he wasn't sure he could make it out alive. With his heart pounding in his chest, he had to decide. Would he risk everything to uncover the truth? Or would he walk away, leaving everything behind to save himself? The choice would haunt him for the rest of his life, no matter what he decided. The weight of the choice was unbearable, but before the rich man could even process the ultimatum Claire had given him, the world around him shifted again. It was as if the universe itself had decided that the time for hesitation was over. The very ground beneath him trembled, and in one swift motion, his entire life was ripped apart. The call came late that night. It wasn't from Vanessa, as he had hoped. It wasn't from Claire, either. No, it was a number he didn't recognize, but somehow, he knew this call would change everything. The voice on the other end was cold, detached, as though the person speaking had no concern for the consequences of their words. If you think you've figured this out, you haven't even begun to understand. You're a pawn in a much larger game. You've been played from the start. The rich man felt his stomach drop. He knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was no random call. This was someone pulling the strings. Someone who had been watching his every move, feeding him lies, and now they were letting him know that the clock had run out. Before he could speak, the voice continued, "Claire is not who you think she is. She's been working for us the entire time. Vanessa was just a distraction, someone to keep you occupied while the real plan was set into motion. You've been so focused on the wrong people, the wrong clues. But now it's time for you to face the truth. Your life, your career, your empire, it's all going to crumble. And there's nothing you can do to stop it." The phone line went dead, leaving him alone with the crippling realization that everything he thought he knew about the conspiracy had been a lie. Claire, the woman who had seemed to be his last connection to any semblance of truth, had been working for them. Vanessa, the mysterious woman whose disappearance had haunted him for days, was nothing more than a pawn in a game far bigger than he could have imagined. And now, the very people he had trusted were closing in on him, tightening their grip, and he was powerless to stop them. His mind raced. This wasn't just about a few shady figures pulling strings behind the scenes anymore. This was a full-scale operation, a conspiracy that reached into the very core of everything he had built. His company, his wealth, his reputation, all of it was in jeopardy.
But it was worse than that.
Whoever these people were, they weren't just after him. They were after everything he represented.
Power.
Influence. Control. And they would stop at nothing to take it all. He couldn't just sit back and let them destroy everything he had worked for. But now the stakes were higher than ever, and the risks were unimaginable. He knew the longer he stayed involved, the more dangerous it would become. He had already lost so much. But if he walked away now, it wouldn't just be his career on the line, it would be his life. In the dead of night, unable to sleep, he began to piece together the new information. The phone call had rattled him, but there was something else, a nagging feeling that he was missing something. Something big. He started to dig deeper, reviewing every file, every document, every conversation he had had with Claire, with Vanessa, with anyone involved. As he combed through the records, his eyes landed on a small detail, something he had overlooked earlier, a meeting that had been set up months ago, a cryptic note buried in the middle of a report, something about the hand that guides. It was a lead, and he had no choice but to follow it. The next day, with little more than the slim hope that he was on the right track, he made his way to a nondescript office building downtown, a place that hadn't been on his radar until now. The note had been specific. It led him to a man named Greg, a name that had appeared only once in the hundreds of documents he had pored over. This was the man who could answer the questions that had been haunting him. When he entered the office, the atmosphere was heavy, like the air had been thick with secrets for years. The man sitting behind the desk was unremarkable in appearance, middle-aged, a little too tidy, but there was something about his eyes. They were too calm, too calculating. A smile that didn't reach them. "I've been expecting you," Greg said, motioning for him to sit. The rich man didn't hesitate. He sat across from Greg, his heart pounding, his breath shallow. "I need answers.
Now."
What the hell is going on? Why is everyone lying to me? Greg's lips twitched into a thin smile, and for a moment, the rich man thought he saw something else behind the calm facade, amusement. It was as if the whole situation, the danger, the confusion, was all some sort of game to him. "You're not the first to ask those questions," Greg said slowly, his voice low. "But I'm afraid you're too far in to walk away now. You've crossed a line, and so has everyone else you've trusted. You've been fed lies, manipulated. Vanessa was never just a pawn. Neither was Claire. They were both players in a game far bigger than your little empire. And now, it's time for you to make a decision. Stay and fight, and you'll burn with them. Or walk away and let everything go up in smoke." The rich man's mind spun. This was bigger than he could have imagined. This wasn't just about some personal vendetta. This was about an entire network of people pulling strings, controlling everything from the shadows. The building, his company, his life, it had all been part of a much larger scheme. Greg's words hit him like a punch. The game was rigged, and the rules were simple. You either played along or you became the next casualty in a war that no one even knew was happening. And he was trapped in the middle of it all, with no way out. The decision weighed heavily on him, but there was no time to think. No time to question his next move. This was the moment of truth, and the clock was ticking down. Either he took the risk and uncovered the entire conspiracy, no matter the cost, or he walked away and let everything crumble. He had no idea what would happen next, but one thing was for sure. This was no longer just about him. It was about everything he had ever believed in, everything he had worked for, and the life he had built. The stakes had never been higher, and the consequences had never been more dire. The rich man felt the weight of everything crashing down on him as he stood outside the abandoned building, the place where it all began. The final piece of the puzzle had been placed before him, but the truth was far more horrifying than he could have ever anticipated. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the realization that the stakes were now more than just his reputation or his empire. It was his very survival that hung in the balance. Greg's cryptic warning echoed in his mind. "You've crossed a line. You're too far in." He couldn't escape it. The decision was clear, yet as he walked into the cold, dimly lit building, his heart raced with the urgency of what he was about to uncover. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The place reeked of secrets, of hidden deals, and broken promises. He could feel the walls closing in as he stepped deeper, the shadows playing tricks on his eyes. Every creak of the floorboards beneath his feet seemed like a reminder that there was no turning back. He had come too far. He had dug too deep. Now, there was no other choice but to confront the dark truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. The silence was suffocating as he reached the heart of the building. A single office door stood ajar, a faint light spilling out from within. He hesitated, the weight of the moment crashing over him like a tidal wave. Then, with a final breath, he pushed the door open. Inside, he found Claire sitting behind a desk, calm and composed. But it wasn't the Claire he had trusted. It wasn't the woman who had shared her secrets with him, who had whispered to him that they could work together to expose the truth. This Claire was different. She wasn't the ally he thought she was.
No.
She was the mastermind, the puppet master pulling the strings all along. And there, standing in front of her, was Greg. The man who had once seemed like an ally now stood side by side with Claire, a twisted smile playing across his face. "I knew you'd find your way here eventually," Claire said, her voice ice-cold. There was no warmth left in her. "You've been so persistent, so determined to uncover the truth, but I'm afraid you've already lost." The rich man's mind raced. Everything that had led him here, all the puzzles he had solved, all the people he had trusted, had been part of a much larger scheme. He had been played from the start, and Claire had been the one pulling the strings. But it wasn't just her. It wasn't just Greg either. This was bigger than both of them. This was about the entire system, about control, manipulation, and power. The rich man had been nothing but a pawn in their game. "You've been working for them all along," he said, his voice shaking with the weight of the realization. "All this time, you were just using me to get to the real prize." As the rich man sat in the dimly lit office, surrounded by the remnants of what had once been his empire, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of finality settling over him. The game was over, or so he thought. After everything that had happened, the betrayals, the secrets, the endless twists, he had finally found the truth, or at least a version of it. But the cost had been far higher than he could have ever imagined. Claire and Greg had vanished without a trace, leaving only the echo of their twisted machinations behind. They had taken everything from him, including his sense of security, his trust in people, and even his understanding of what was real. But in the wreckage of his world, he had learned something far more important. The truth didn't always set you free. Sometimes, it just left you with a heavy burden you weren't prepared to carry. For days, he had been in hiding, trying to put the pieces together, trying to make sense of it all. He had contacted the authorities, shared the evidence, but it was clear that not everyone was as eager to uncover the truth as he had been. There were forces at play far larger than he could have ever anticipated. People in high places had a way of protecting their own, and the game of power was never about justice. It was about who could control the narrative. The evidence he had gathered, the names he had uncovered, were all tucked away in a safe place, but there was no telling if it would ever see the light of day. It wasn't long before the media started picking up the story. The headlines, the news clips, all of them painted him as the victim, the man who had been blindsided by a conspiracy that reached into the heart of the corporate world. Yet, the public's perception felt hollow. No one truly knew what had happened behind closed doors. No one understood the depth of the darkness he had uncovered. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the power. It was about control, the kind of control that had reached so far and wide, it had become impossible to even distinguish who the real enemies were. He thought about the people who had been close to him, the ones who had been caught in the crossfire. Some had walked away with their lives intact, while others had paid a price that could never be undone. He wondered if they were better off not knowing the whole truth, if ignorance had been their shield. But there was no turning back now. He had seen it all. He had lived through it. And as the days passed, he found himself asking a question that haunted him. What now? One evening, as the sun set behind the city skyline, casting a golden glow over the streets below, the rich man found himself standing at the window of his penthouse. The view was breathtaking, but it no longer held the same appeal. Everything he had once worked for, everything he had fought to build, seemed meaningless now. The legacy he had hoped to leave behind had been shattered, not by his enemies, but by his own trust in the wrong people. He had been blinded by ambition, by a thirst for power, and in the end, it had cost him everything. But as he stared out over the city, a realization began to form. Perhaps it wasn't too late. Maybe this wasn't the end of his story. Maybe it was just the beginning of something new. The truth had been a burden, but it had also given him clarity. He wasn't the man he had once been. He had been changed by this experience, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a strange sense of peace. Not the kind of peace that came from winning or surviving, but the kind that came from understanding who he truly was. The man he had been was gone, and the man who remained was someone who had learned the hardest lesson of all. Nothing in life was guaranteed. Not trust. Not loyalty. Not even success. Everything could change in an instant. As he turned away from the window, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was a simple, quiet knock, but it carried with it a sense of finality. He wasn't sure who it was, but deep down he knew. It wasn't over yet. There were still people watching, still forces moving in the shadows. The conspiracy hadn't just disappeared, it had merely changed form. And somewhere out there, there was still someone who held the key to the next chapter of the story. The door opened slowly, and in the doorway stood a familiar face. It was a face he had thought he would never see again. A figure from his past, someone who had always been there in the background, watching, waiting. Someone he had once trusted implicitly. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, there was no need for words. The tension in the room thickened, and the rich man knew that whatever came next, it wouldn't be easy. He had uncovered the truth, but it hadn't set him free. It had only pulled him deeper into a web of secrets, lies, and power that was far from over. As the door clicked shut behind him, the man took a seat, and they stared at each other in silence. The answers were still out there. The truth was still waiting to be uncovered. And in that moment, as the rich man faced the man who had returned from his past, he understood something crucial. The game was never really over. There would always be new twists, new turns, and new enemies. The only thing that was certain was that nothing would ever be the same again. And so, as the story came to a close, the rich man realized the real question wasn't whether he could overcome the conspiracy. It was whether he could live with the consequences of everything he had learned. Would he continue to fight? Would he seek vengeance? Or would he choose to walk away, to start anew, and leave behind the life that had once consumed him? The answer was unclear, but one thing was certain: his journey was far from over. And with that, the door closed, leaving the rich man to confront the unknown future that lay ahead. The mystery wasn't just about the conspiracy anymore. It was about who he had become in the process. As the camera faded to black, the lingering question remained: who really wins when the game is over? The truth had been uncovered, but in its wake, more mysteries remained. The rich man had learned the hardest lessons, but the real story, the one that still haunted him, was one that had yet to be told. And as the credits rolled, the audience couldn't help but wonder, is this truly the end, or just another beginning?